Thank you again to everyone who's sticking around this whole day. This last panel here is offering community perspectives, so this really rounds us out. We've had perspectives offered from people who are working nationally, politically, from academics, from people who are working in national advocacy, and now we get the take which is probably the most close to home for everyone in the audience, those people working with local Iowa-based organizations. So I'll just hand it over to Robin Clark Bennett, who will be moderating this panel, and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So Dr. Campo urged us to take this discussion to the streets, and it is my pleasure to introduce a panel of Iowa leaders who do just that, who are shaping the realities that elected officials respond to in their work. And so we have with us today Jean-Paul Chassan Cardenas. Jean-Paul is an immigrant from Guatemala who has been recognized at the local, state, and national level for his work with and for underserved, underrepresented communities. Currently, he's the State 4-H, Youth Development, and K-12 Leader Director at Iowa State Extension and Outreach. Joseph Enriquez Henry is the State Director for the League of United Latin American Citizens of Iowa, LULAC. In 2011, he founded LULAC Council 307 in Des Moines because he wanted Latinos in Iowa to become part of a national organization that could help them reclaim their spirit in fighting to address their rights in the areas of immigration, jobs, healthcare, and education. Jay Byers is CEO for the Greater Des Moines Partnership. The partnership is the regional economic and community development organization serving more than 5,000 businesses and 21 affiliate chambers of commerce in central Iowa. Mazahir Salih is vice president of the Center for Worker Justice of Eastern Iowa, a dynamic grassroots organization based in Iowa City whose membership is comprised mostly of recent immigrants of Latin American and African origin. As coordinator of CWJ's Immigration Committee, Ms. Salih has been at the forefront of a host of local initiatives to defend the rights of low-income and immigrant workers. And Sandra Sanchez is originally from Mexico, where she worked for the private sector for 15 years. Her current position is Immigrants' Voice Program Director for the American Friends Service Committee. She started in October 1995, where she obtained accreditation by the Board of Immigration Appeals to provide legal immigration assistance in 2000. So I welcome our panelists. Their bios are, each of them has a much more extensive, actually, bio than this, and you can find them in the program. But our format, like other panels, is going to be that we will have each panelist, we have a larger panel here, we'll have each panelist speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll take questions at the end. So as a reminder, or for any of you who have just joined us, there are cards on each table, and as you hear the panelists, please note down questions that you have for the panelists and turn them in. And at the end, we will address all the questions that participants have and look forward to a lively discussion. So I'd like to actually start, we'll have the women bookmark, I think. So I'd like to start with Sandra Sanchez, actually, and then proceed to Jean-Paul and down the line. So Sandra, would you please? And actually, I'm going to ask, it's the end of a day in a rather dark room. Would you mind coming up and standing up to deliver your presentation, your remarks?
Maybe it won't be a good idea because I'm so short. I don't know why people will see me. So in any event, like she said, I am Sandra Sanchez and I work for the American Friends Service Committee. What is the American Friends Service Committee? It's a Quaker-based nonprofit organization with more than 50 years of presence in Iowa, established in Des Moines. Our constituents are immigrants and refugees, particularly targeting the Latino immigrant population, since they represent the fastest growing foreign-born population in the state of Iowa. The Immigrants' Voice program, which I direct, uses a two-pronged approach. One is community organizing, legislative advocacy, and leadership development, among other things. It also informs and educates both the immigrant and non-immigrant residents of Iowa on issues impacting immigrants and refugees. Sadly, due to the crisis, the economic crisis, our budget was cut, and recently we have been focusing mostly in central Iowa instead of my previous job, which was going across the whole state. The second prong is the provision of legal immigration services for both immigrants and refugees for a nominal fee or free of charge when clients are unable to pay. We serve an average of 450 to 500 clients every year, that without taking into account the consultations that may not end up in developing a particular case or a legal case. The IVP works at the local, state, and national level on legislative issues in collaboration with other nonprofit organizations, such as the ACLU, for example, several ecumenical groups with different denominations represented there. And some of the issues that we have been working for the last several years has been, like Erica Johnson mentioned, the issue of getting driver's licenses for Dreamers and similarly situated drivers, meaning those who are undocumented or who are in the process or that for whatever reason their visa expired. We are also trying to stop the building of, we actually were successful in stopping the building of a couple of detention facilities that were being looked around in central Iowa. And thanks to a broad coalition, we were able to stop them. Like Erica said, we are working in coalition. So I didn't want to repeat it, but she said, go for it, because maybe they need to hear it twice. So we are also working towards having police departments and sheriff's departments not to collaborate with ICE. It's not very well known to a lot of people, including at some point Erica, because she wasn't working for the ACLU at that point. But it took several years of working behind the scenes to get, for instance, the Polk County Sheriff to move towards that direction. But I want to share a story with you, what really made him change his mind, because he was able to confidentially share the story with me, and now he tells the story publicly, so I'm okay in sharing it. One of the many times when a woman was being in detention due to some traffic violation, and she's married to a U.S. citizen, but for whatever reason, lack of information, lack of money, he hadn't petitioned for her, even though they had 7 children. Okay, so there he goes with her to the detention center. They were from a different county, and the children are crying, holding to her skirt, and the sheriff happened to see that when he was coming out of the building, and he stopped, and he was trying to calm the kids, and he started asking questions, and he thought to himself, there is something absolutely wrong in the system that we are deporting a mother of 7 just for a traffic violation. So that was the final drop that helped him change his mind. At the state and national level, we also do legislative advocacy work with both the state legislature, like Erica mentioned, and with the U.S. Congress, defeating anti-immigrant bills and other provisions, and also advocating for a humane, sensible, and modernized immigration system. And the reason for this is because a permanent solution is only modernizing our current immigration system. Many people think that, oh, well, why don't immigrants just go and make a line and fill out whatever paperwork they have to do, and that's it. It's not that easy. So there is actually no line or no way to get legal status. One other thing that we do is shifting the political narrative. AFSC started the implementation of a temporary program called Governing Under the Influence to shed light on how corporations control the political discourse through lobbying, campaign financing, and limitless donations to pay for political ads during midterm and presidential election. And I wanted to show you this newspaper that came out on April 22nd, talking about the Koch brothers, who are willing and daring to donate $300 million to the campaigns of 5 Republican candidates to the presidential elections. So there is something intrinsically wrong when 2 people can spend $300 million to influence a political campaign when the common citizen can just cast 1 vote. So I have a lot more to say, but I don't want to go over my time. I'd rather try to spend some time discussing some of these issues with you all as you may have questions. Thank you so much.
Good day, how are you doing today? O buenas tardes, si es un poquito tarde, ¿no? John-Paul Cárdenas, I am the state leader for 4-H. I am the first Latino to hold that title, not only in Iowa, but across the United States in the last 120 years of the history of 4-H. It wasn't California, it wasn't Arizona, it wasn't Florida, it was Iowa who did that. And as of a couple weeks, I am also the lead of the main task force of the state 4-H leaders from across the country, and will be serving in that position for a while. What is 4-H? It is not what it used to be. It used to be really looked at like an agricultural program, but the history of 4-H is much more diverse than that. It is the land-grant university's program. And land-grant university, but if you know a little bit about the history of Iowa State and the rest of land-grants university, federal government gave land to create university and states so long as they were the university of the people. By the way, I'm a graduate from University of Iowa, so I have a split personality. But in this case, I will talk about Iowa State. They needed to provide technology and everything else to the common person in Iowa and across the United States. That was their mission, to really help the common citizen connect with technology. However, they failed for the first 20 years of their life until they figured out that adults are not early adopters. So they began to work with kids, and that was how 4-H became a national power, by sharing the technology of, at that time, agriculture with youth. And over time, 4-H became the largest youth development organization, not only in Iowa, but across the United States and the world, serving over 4 million kids. In Iowa alone, we serve over 100,000 kids, or that is about 1 in 5 kids in Iowa. So we are a massive organization with legs in every single county in the United States. However, when you look at our mission, it doesn't say anything about agriculture, right? Even though we have the great history, and I truly believe that 4-H is one of the reasons Iowa became the breadbasket of the world. because technology is best adopted. When I came into this position, I didn't think I was going to get the job because I actually did not apply. I was asked 3 times to come. And they asked me to do a presentation, so I was at, I had a very nice position doing civil rights work. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go over there and tell them what I actually think and then go home happily ever after. And guess what? They kept me. Suckers. No, they're wonderful. And the reason they kept me is because I was bringing a message that they were ready to hear. There was something happening and percolating, not only in Iowa, but across the United States in the 4-H movement, which is we cannot continue to serve the same kids and expect different results. I came in at a time where 4-H had lost 32,000 kids in 10 years. And so my job has been to rebuild that organization from the roots up. And the single thing that I said I would do is that I would open up this organization to every kid, whether they be an immigrant or not, whether they be gay, lesbian, transgender, whether they be African American or Latino, they live in cities or they live in rural areas. It is about every child in Iowa, and that is the one thing that I said I would do. But what people didn't realize, and it sounded very good to them, is that that meant a significant change in how we do business. It meant looking at ourselves and our organization and look at what we were doing, which is venerated and respected. And 4-H has been a very successful organization for over 100 years, and changing the way we do it. To stop asking the questions that kept kids out, questions that by surrogacy would exclude immigrant kids or migrant workers or other children that are not there. But not only that, changing the messages that we give and putting diversity, especially where do you come from and what do you bring in culture and all those wonderful things at the forefront of our work. And so we began to work from the area of citizenship, not citizenship in the way that it's usually defined as a piece of papers, but in how do you give back to your community. So we defined citizenship in that crisp, wonderful way, which meant if you're a 4-H'er, part of your responsibility is to give back to the community. But guess what? It has not been an easy journey. When I came on board, the first few things that happened, and I'm going to skip through some slides, was that there was some amount, and this is a wonderful cartoon by Lalo Alcatraz, which, by the way, I met right here in this building many, many years ago as he was doing one of the first Latino conferences in the state. And what happens is that there was some irritation that I was actually talking about myself as a Latino, and I was proud to be a Latino. I was proud to be an immigrant from Guatemala. And so I began to get all kinds of negative messages, not only from folks in social media, but I began to get messages from folks, the common folks, the folks of 4-H, not saying that it was bad to bring in kids of color or immigrants and so forth, but it was a different message. It was things that were subtle, things that were just veiled, hidden underneath. Like, for example, here's one. The number one thing I would hear is, well, 4-H is a leadership program. So if you start serving those kids, aren't you an at-risk program? There's a subtle framing there, right? Things around the pledge. My country. So you shouldn't be here because you're from Guatemala, really. I mean, when you say your country, what does that mean? Right? Or even pretty overt things, and I have been told many a times to go back home. I propose that there's a different model. And I propose, and I was going to talk a little about the Latino and immigrant paradox. There's a piece of research, there's some research out there that talks about that the further away you are from your generation or immigration roots, actually the worse you do in many aspects, whether it be health, education, child welfare, and so forth. So we need to go back and start re-looking at how do we think kids should assimilate into our communities and start talking about how we are going to own the kids and take the time to change our institutions and the way we do things. Because they're not our future. They're here today. and they're our leaders. Thank you.
I do not have a prepared speech, but want to let you know my name is Joe Enriquez Henry, and I am the State Director of the League of United Latin American Citizens here in Iowa. LULAC is the oldest Latino civil rights organization in the country. We were founded in 1929 to help displaced Latinos, 77,000 Mexican Americans who were displaced after the 1846 Civil War between Mexico and the U.S. Since then, we've been fighting for civil rights, fighting to increase educational opportunities for Latinos. We marched with Cesar Chavez in the 60s and 70s. And here in Iowa, and LULAC has 1,000 councils throughout the United States. We have about 250,000 members, volunteers, who work in their 1,000 councils throughout the country. Here in Iowa, we have 10 councils in Iowa. We have been growing exponentially as far within LULAC and as a community in Iowa. We have worked with the ACLU. We have worked with the American Friends Service Committee to fight for social justice, civil rights, to fight against voter suppression. And one of the key things that we did back in 2012 was to fight for voter suppression, fight against voter suppression in that year. And it took about 3 years. We actually just kind of finished up that lawsuit, so that was a very good thing. But the most important thing here in Iowa, as throughout the country with LULAC, is to activate our community. And that's why we're growing here in Iowa and throughout the country. We are going into the communities where we have a high proportion of Latinos and forming councils. And they are engaging with elected officials in their area to make sure that we have equal footing on all different levels of local government and educational opportunities. When it comes to immigration, that is something, because that's what this meeting was today focused on. On immigration, we have been fighting on that for the last several years here in Iowa. And we have tried to do everything that we could to work with different groups in coalition to promote the need for comprehensive immigration reform. And we have gotten resources from our national office to discuss the issues that are important when it comes to comprehensive immigration reform. We have some notorious elected leaders like Steve King in northwestern Iowa, and we have been trying to engage with that gentleman for the last 2 years, and we have spent time in Washington, D.C. trying to meet with Mr. King, and unfortunately he will not meet with us. We've also met with other congressional leaders on a national level. LULAC has every year Latino Legislative Day in February, where we meet with approximately 85 congressional leaders to promote issues that are important to Latinos. Of course, comprehensive immigration reform is one of those. Along with that is education, health care, jobs, a livable wage. And I'm happy to say that I think that we're making movement forward. On comprehensive immigration reform, though, that is something that our conservative elected leaders just don't seem to understand the importance of. We did meet with Joni Ernst, Chuck Grassley, and again, we tried to meet with Steve King this last February. We did get some interesting discussions with two of them, and we did have about an hour-long discussion with the director for Steve King. After those meetings that we had in February, we came back here in Iowa to discuss ways in which we can engage our community members to fight for comprehensive immigration reform. We just had a state convention last week in Davenport where we had over 100 Latinos who participated in our state convention. We have LULAC members here, Janet and others here from council here in Iowa City. And we discussed many things about how we can move forward here in Iowa. And I think that this is going to be a very interesting year because of the fact that we're going to continue to push for comprehensive immigration reform. We're also going to participate in the Iowa caucuses, which is gearing up in momentum this year with the presidential candidates, and then moving into the caucus event that's going to happen next February. There are 1,747 precincts in Iowa. We as Latinos are going to need to participate in those caucuses. We're not going to participate in all of them, but we can participate in those areas where we have a high proportion of Latinos. So we have a program, we're going to move forward on that, and we're going to push our fellow members to promote issues that are important to our community, and we're going to address those with the presidential candidates this summer into the fall, and of course right before the caucuses and into the caucuses. So we as a community, we are engaged. We're going to be mobilizing more, organizing our community, hopefully forming more councils, and you're going to be hearing more from us. And we do have one interesting saying: if you aren't already related to a Latino, you soon will be. So thank you for allow me to speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jay Byers. I am the CEO of the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and was mentioned in my introduction. The partnership is the regional economic and community development organization serving Central Iowa. We are currently helping lead economic development in 7 counties in Central Iowa. We have 21 affiliate chambers of commerce, and we have over 5,300 regional members. That makes us actually the 4th largest regional chamber in the entire country. And first and foremost, I just want to thank all of you for inviting me to be here today. This is a very important issue for us as an organization, and I'm very excited to be able to talk about that here today. Also very excited to be back in Iowa City. I'm actually an alum of the University of Iowa Law School from 1996, and actually my wife was in that class as well. And we had our reception when we got married just down the street at IMU, so it's always fun to be back in Iowa City. And it's especially really cool to be here in Old Brick, which is really an institution not only for Iowa City, but for the entire state. So very, very cool. And also, being here today with sitting on this panel is pretty humbling to me. A number of these people I've known for a long time, highly skilled, highly respected, and just to be up here with these guys is an honor as well. And to be here with all of you, I know some of you in the audience I've worked with in the past as well. So why is someone from a Chamber of Commerce or an economic development organization from Des Moines really concerned about this issue? And I'll start by saying, from the partnership's perspective, Greater Des Moines has had a lot of success in the last few years. Hopefully you've been hearing about that, a lot of great rankings, a lot of great economic development projects. And one of the things that we've really been focusing on is how do we really put a laser-sharp focus on enhancing our global connectivity. It's a global economy, and as a region, as a state, you have to be able to compete globally. And so we've really had a 3-prong approach to that. First of which is exporting. We've really worked hard to try to get our companies to export more. If you look at within the United States, less than 1% of small businesses export. 95% of the consumers live outside of this country. Huge disconnect, huge missed opportunities. Increasing exports will increase jobs and capital investment in the United States. So we're very, very aggressive in pushing our companies in region to export more. We've rolled out a new regional export plan in conjunction with the Brookings Institute in the last couple of years and have really focused on that. Second is to increase foreign direct investment to Central Iowa. And basically all that is taking an economic development strategy and taking it globally. So lining up your target industries with other markets in other countries where you can attract companies to expand within Central Iowa, whether it's a new factory, whether it's a distribution center, whether it's a corporate headquarters relocation, those sort of things. So we just recently, it was announced that we were part of a new group, again with the Brookings Institute, one of only 6 regions in the country, to put together a new foreign direct investment plan. So again, exporting, foreign direct investment. So the third prong is why I'm so excited to be here today to talk about it, because many times people in business and sometimes economic development don't like to talk about this issue, and they need to, and that's international talent attraction, and directly related to immigration. We all know that we are a country of immigrants, we're a state of immigrants, and in Des Moines, we're a region of immigrants. If you look at demographics from the last decade, but for immigration in the last decade, we would have lost population but for immigration, right? Talent is king when you're talking about economic development. I've worked on a lot of deals, working on a lot of deals right now, and almost always the first question is workforce and talent. One is numbers. Do you have enough people for us to be successful? And two, do they have the skills that we're going to be able to have, our company will be able to be successful? That's high-skilled workers, medium-skilled workers, low-skilled workers. And we need a lot more workers in this state. And all you have to do is look at the demographics, right? So you put that on top of the fact that we have antiquated national immigration system that is broken. I think pretty much anyone you talk to about immigration will agree that it's broken. The problem is, how do you fix it, and what are the priorities? When I look at the immigration system, I look at an antiquated system that has not addressed the key problem that's resulted in some of the issues that we're dealing with today. And in fact, I think lots of times, kind of all sides of the debate don't focus on what I think is the most important issue, and I like to call that future flow. We have a system that is based on a 1960s quotas that don't make any sense for our economy whatsoever. It doesn't take into account the economic realities. Immigration is driven primarily by people who want to improve their lives and want better jobs. So why don't we have a system that reflects that a lot better? So that's the biggest issue that I think we need to fix moving forward. And quite frankly, I think that part of the debate rarely gets discussed. In terms of what that looks like, to make sure that we raise all those caps to fit those needs. A couple of things just to highlight, why we think this is broken. High-skilled immigration, H-1B visas, cap is gone within usually a day or two. It happened again this year. Huge shortage of STEM workers, but yet we have all this global talent that we should be going after, and we can't we can't even recruit them to come to the United States. I think it's a horrible economic development policy that we're totally missing the boat. Secondly, entrepreneurship. This is something that I'm sure most of you know. Immigrants are more than twice as likely to start a business, yet there is no category for entrepreneurs in our immigration system. A lot of our competition does. We don't. Again, missing the boat. Innovation on the immigration front, or the innovation front, 76% of patents granted to top U.S. patent-producing universities had an immigrant inventor, with inventors originating from 88 different countries. We know we're sitting here at the University of Iowa. We recruit a lot of international students, but yet our system does not allow a large majority of them to stay. We educate them, we subsidize them, we send them back to compete against us. Again, a horrible economic development policy. That's what we do. So when you look at immigration policy, we look at it from what makes sense for economic development and building our future, and all these examples just show how we're missing the boat. And again, these are issues that they don't get talked about like they need to get talked about. So again, thank you for having me here. This is probably a perspective you might not have heard yet today, but that's really important to us. From the Greater Des Moines Partnership's perspective, we're also highly engaged in public policy. Federal immigration reform is one of our top federal priorities. We're going to be taking 190 people to Washington, D.C. in a couple of weeks to talk about this issue and many other issues. Also, at the state level, we've been highly engaged, and a number of the folks here have been partners with us. One of the big wins we had a few years ago is, you might recall, states like Oklahoma, states like Arizona, states like Alabama passed some very draconian legislation that really sent the wrong message in terms of immigration, and that really were very anti-business. And with a coalition, with a lot of the people sitting up here and all across the state, we stopped that in Iowa at a time when politically, if you had asked me at the beginning of the session, I didn't think we could have stopped it, and we did stop it. And the state's better for it. And that's one of the things I'm very proud of that I was able to help work on, along with a lot of you in this room. And that was also the beginnings of what was called the Iowa Immigration Education Coalition, which we kept going for a number of years just to make sure that legislation wouldn't come back, and it hasn't. So again, I'm proud to be here today, proud to work on this issue, and I look forward to any questions. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Mazahir Saleh. As Robin said, I'm the Vice President of the Center for Worker Justice. And The Center for Worker Justice is a grassroots organization that unites people from people low wage worker, and immigrant worker together to aim social and economic justice. And most of our members are first generation immigrant and from different countries such as Latin America or Africa, Asia, some people from Asia, and different countries. So immigration is really an important issue to us. We see the result of the broken immigration system just like in the daily experience that our members face or their family. And we've been seeing like deportation of family, so separation of family. And also we've been seeing people like having a fear of separation. And also we see like some members are facing a wage theft, which is where their employer, they take advantage of their fear and just stealing their hard work and earning. And also, we see like a lot of isolation from language, lack of ID, and also culture barriers. Like people across the country, we organize in supporting the reform. We held rallies and we educate community members. We met also with the elected official, and even I traveled to Washington, D.C. and met with a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee in support of the immigration reform. But as you know, the process of reform is stuck. And the only way to get it move again is to create pressure here in our local level and make our politicians hear us and listen to us. Like, I'm going just to talk to you about like 5 things that we do at CWJ so to make difference in the day-to-day reality of immigration. Number 1, helping people become citizens. Last fall, we organized free naturalization clinic, and in which the people can come and apply. They're eligible, of course. They can come and apply for their citizenship. And we done this clinic with help of University of Iowa College of Law, and where the student will come and fill out the application, and it will be reviewed by the professor from the University of Iowa. In this case, in this way, they have their application done, and they will be in the way to get their citizenship so they can be a voter. And number 2, educating people about our government and immigration. We held like many workshops to discuss how laws are passed in different levels, state level or even Congress level, and also learn more about immigration issues. We have different groups. We have refugees, undocumented immigrants, and U.S.-born members. All of them, they come together and sit down and discuss the challenge and the problem that each group faces. Number 3, passing local laws. Even if we cannot yet pass the immigration reform, there are many things we can do here locally. I'm really happy to say that just a few weeks ago, we made a history by passing the first community or ID ordinance in the Midwest, the first one in the Midwest. That was here in Johnson County. So it created an ID available to all Johnson County residents, so everyone can have an access to the community resource and also at least feel the sense of inclusion, not exclusion. 4, protesting injustice. We refuse just to sit down and become silent and watch immigration-related abuse. That's why we organize public action that have recovered over $10,000 in unpaid wage for local workers who faced work theft. we have changed discriminatory school policies and helped organize large action against deportation that tear families apart. Of our local leader, his name is Pastor Max, we really had good organize on that. And we also have learned, we learned from DREAM activists that direct action can change the public debate. Finally, the building alliance. We feel like one immigrant can do a little, but together we can do a lot. And if we join with another large, powerful network, we can change the political debate. That's why CWJ have a strong network of labor union, charities, and civil rights groups that work together around our common goal, which is justice for all workers. And thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you to our panelists. Okay, I'm going to start with the first is to Jean-Paul in 4-H. Today is the first time I've heard about your organization's change to focus on a more inclusive environment and one that's less focused on just one type of member. Is there a PR campaign in the works?
Yes. However, I put it back. I put it back about 6 months. I felt that we had to go back and retrain our staff and retrain ourselves. I think one error that we tend to do is when we mobilize and try to reach communities, and this is actually a lesson for political folks too, is that we assume that they're going to want the product that we have. And so we've embarked in about 6 months to a year-long self-training campaign within our structures to make sure that the folks who, the workers, the volunteers, also have the level of cultural competence that they need in order to be effective. And so that's one of the things we did. The other one is we've changed programs a lot. For example, we have 3 new incubators because before they come into 4-H, they need to be armed with youth who are not traditionally 4-Hers need to be armed with how does this process and system work. And so one of those is actually the 15th, 16th, and 17th of May. We will bring youth, about 120 youth from all over the state, and I hope you guys bring a bunch.
You got it. We will.
It is basically free for youth to come, and we will have them in camp in Madrid. I call it Madrid, but most people call it Madrid, right? Iowa, and we will support leadership development from the cultural sense. We actually call it Maíz. And the reason we call it Maíz is because, well, may I take just one more minute to tell kind of a story I usually tell? Which is immigrants, especially Latino immigrants and Iowans, have a lot of things in common that people don't realize. For example, do Iowans love their families? Raise your hands if you believe that's true. Do Latino and immigrant communities do too? Right? Do Iowans believe in hard work? Yes. Raise your hands. Do Latino and immigrant families do too? Yes. And finally, corn, chocolate, tomatoes. We gave you a few things that are pretty Iowan, okay? And so I'm not sure that you all here who are around this table are not actually Latinos and don't know it yet. And so we take that approach is to bring back some of those stories, those narratives that sometimes get left out, because I think that's a really great place to ground youth, to know who their identity is and how special they are, and that they are joining other special youth from other ethnicities, races, sexual orientations, so on, to be part of our great family in Iowa. Iowa's a great state, and people don't recognize that.
Thank you. To Jay, how do we encourage a chamber in a small town to actively seek and or embrace immigrant workers or businesses? In other words, what's in it for them? Our area is primarily white, no diversity is this person's context.
Well, I think the bottom line is chambers and economic developments, organizations that don't have a focus on diversity and inclusion and focus on bringing in all new businesses won't be around very long. All you have to do is look at the demographics, right? So it's smart business to engage all businesses and to figure out, different ways to offer, whether it's traditional programming, making it more relevant for all businesses. So again, I think that any chamber or economic development group that isn't reaching out to all businesses, all new businesses, whether they're owned by immigrants or not, it's not a very smart business strategy.
So for some of the other activists here, is there any effort to overturn Iowa's English-only law?
Well, you know what? Is there an effort? We have fought that twice. We won the first time, lost the second time. Both times was under a Democrat governor when English only came about. We have tried to bring that up again in the state legislature, and there has been some drafting of the bill. I think there are people in here that might be able to bring that up. But yes, we certainly want to mobilize to fight that very racist approach here in Iowa. We shouldn't tolerate that. That's one of the reasons why we're mobilizing on a grassroots level throughout Iowa to fight on issues that are important to our community.
Yeah, and I would like to, what Joe just mentioned, again, is how our democracy is not working. I remember when the law was first introduced, the bill was first introduced, the state Congress, the Capitol, was packed with people against that bill. And there were only 3 people in support of the bill. 2 of them were from out of state, okay? So how is it possible that you have a whole Capitol that in history, in many, many years, they hadn't seen a whole Capitol that packed and so well-behaved, so civil, demanding to stop this bill, and they didn't do it. And I want to add also that several of us were meeting with, at the time, Governor Vilsack, and we told him, Latinos in Iowa may not have the political clout to convince you not to do this. But if you have any presidential aspirations, you are just killing them. And it happened just like that, because the time when he was running in the first presidential election, he was booed by the Democratic Convention members because we may not have political clout in Iowa in some places, and I say in some places because in other places that is changing, but at the national level, we definitely do. So conservative, extremist people, politicians, lobbyists, so forth and so on, they better pay attention to that, and they better stop ignoring the issues and concerns of the Latino voters.
So this question, I think, could apply to any of you. What can local county political parties do to encourage Latino or Latina participation in the Iowa caucuses in February?
Yeah. Do you want to go first? Okay. Well, you know, we're not going to wait for the state parties to do it. We're going to do it on our own. We've been working for very, very many years as LULAC and other organizations to encourage the state parties to engage the community within the political process. That has not happened. So it has come a time where we have 73,000 potential Latino voters in Iowa. We've identified about 50,000 registered Latino voters in Iowa, where we will work as a community to move forward on political participation. Caucuses are very important. It's usually, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's a white person's game. It's usually upper middle class. Very little educational effort is put forth on how to participate in the caucuses. How many people here know what the caucuses are? Okay, great. We now have a Latino who has done, who's going to be doing an online educational, Stefan Schmidt from Iowa State, on how to participate in the caucuses. We are going to engage our community on those online educational training. American Friends Service Committee also has a group that's working on doing things during the caucuses. We're going to work with other groups too to mobilize that participation, so it just isn't a rich person's game. And then talk about the issues during those caucuses, move them, get them adopted, because each state party can adopt a certain platform at those caucus events, along with voting on presidential candidates. So we want to mobilize. We wish that the state parties would provide some funding for that, but that has not happened. Again, there's some discussion that's happening on the Democratic Party side, and I think the Republicans will too. But at the end of the day, it takes money. We'll have to raise that, and it takes a community. We have that, so we will move forward.
Can I add a comment?
Well, we've been talking about that. We're working on getting some funding out of a Latino DC group, and there's Voto Latino that has many, many celebrities. It'd be great. There's the Latino Vote Project. I believe Eva Longoria is part of that. So yeah, that would be great to do that. Again, we have to work on raising money, but there's a group of us who really know how to do this political work, and we're going to educate within LULAC our councils. We have 10 again throughout the state, and move forward on that. And just kind of let you know, when you look at the 6% of the Latino population, and the 6% of the population in Iowa is Latino, there are 7 counties that have 54% of our people. So we need to focus on those communities first, but by all means, we'll be reaching out by email, phone call, letter writing, and so forth to the other communities in Iowa. We do have a special focus on Steve King's congressional district. So we will be spending time over there. And we have, and just kind of let you know, if you don't think Latinos are speaking out, that's wrong. We are speaking out. We are demanding that these elected leaders speak with us. We are going to Washington, D.C., we're going to their offices. But I got to tell you, they're very intimidated. They don't, like King, he doesn't want to talk. So we're going to have to figure out a way to kind of trap him, and we'll do it.
I wanted to add that, and I don't talk about politics, obviously, but when you look at the numbers are changing so rapidly. We tend to think of Iowa as a very white state. It is not anymore, especially if you look at the bottom of the age pyramid. Latinos leading the way, but also African Americans. 1 in 5 kids in the state of Iowa now is a kid of color and getting ready to turn 18. And so this is a pretty huge change. While we lost 53,000 white students out of our PK-12 system in the last 10 years, we've gained roughly 54,000 kids of color in that same system. So this is an issue that affects our communities very deeply. And it's part of the reason that 4-H has made the bend to try to serve all youth in Iowa.
Are you sure?
Just kind of, John-Paul has done some very interesting research. K through 12 in Iowa, 500,000 kids. 23% of those 500,000 kids come from minority families. The biggest school district in Iowa, Des Moines, 32,000 kids. 61% are minority. We are growing exponentially. So even though we're 6% now, just in the Latino, but other minority groups added together, within the next 10 to 15 years, we are going to grow exponentially. So we have a responsibility to provide leadership, and we will be reaching out to others to make sure that happens.
Can I just add just one teeny comment regarding both? I just want to raise some issue that Jay touched on, and that is the fact that immigration or immigrants are a very mismanaged resource in this nation. And it is very sad for me to have seen and witnessed professionals from other countries that are doing menial jobs or that are working in meatpacking plans. It's very discouraging to me that many leadership development programs are using only the mainstream model of leadership, not recognizing that immigrants can bring innovation and creativity, just like Jay was mentioning, and that can give that edge to this country in order to be more competitive with other countries. We are just basically not taking advantage of the talents and gifts that these individuals are bringing. And last, we have a generation of baby boomers retiring. Who is going to replace those workers? Who is going to contribute to the systems in order to keep the systems working? And how are we going to make sure that they have the opportunity to develop their skills? And I really appreciate the fact that Jay mentioned that we need workers at all levels. We don't want to repeat the Silicon Valley story, okay? The Silicon Valley story was that at some point it was so packed with very highly trained and professional experts, but that took away all the people that were in with middle school skills and lower skills in order to support that community. They couldn't afford the rent. They couldn't afford to buy food. They had to commute 50 miles away in order to work there. And then they want to repeat the same thing now with the STEM program. I don't think that that is smart. So I totally agree with Jay's observation that we need all those areas of workers and not to focus only on those highly skilled workers.
And to continue on this theme a little, actually, Dr. Rocha talked earlier today about the futility or the alienation people feel toward the political system when they're getting so many antagonistic messages toward the community. And I think that one thing that really confronts that is local victories. And so I'd like to ask Mazahir to talk a little bit more about the community ID victory, establishing the first community ID. And that was a campaign really led by immigrant workers in this community.
Yes, we've been working on this for the first time we found out that we really need a community ID. When we was talking to some immigrant and some people from here, from our, not immigrant only, I want to just put 3 lines under that. A lot of people in the community was being talking and find out there is an issue with the interaction with the police, which is when the police here in Iowa most likely will stop people with color more than the white people. And we find out that some of those people, they have lack of ID. And always, when the police stop one of those and they don't have an ID to prove who they are, things will escalate very quickly, and they will take them to the jail. And sometimes they end up deportation if they don't have, of course, if they were undocumented, which is sometimes they don't have anything. They don't commit any crimes. They are very useful people in the community, and we just sat down and discussed what we have to do. And we find out if we had, everybody have ID, and if they can identify who they are, then maybe they are not gonna escalate this issue and take it to ICE and all this, since our sheriff was requesting, honoring the ICE request by holding the people in jail until they come and get them. And we start organize from all the people with really support of allies from this community, and also the student from the University of Iowa College of Law. And we start doing this, and also I will just mention also Professor Allies. She was really helpful on that. And we work a lot on this, and we done a survey. We find out a lot of people, they need ID. Some the undocumented people, they need ID. The people who retired and they give up the driving anymore, they also need an ID. And also people who cannot obtain a government ID due to they lost their birth certificate, they don't have one at all, even though they're born here. They lost them due to natural disaster. All of this, like, we done like maybe 300 survey, and we find out, yes, we need it. And we work very hard on it. And finally, we just, as I told you earlier, it has been announced that we have it. And we figure out, like, from another community who have this, like, have a lot of benefit. I think, for my own opinions, I think just feeling that you belong to this community, this like huge, you know? And the right that to identify who you are, this is also huge, you know? That's why getting the ID will be really good thing for everybody here, and this is for us a really big, big victory that we have.
That's a big one.
Thanks.
I have a question for Jay. What is the current responsiveness or lack thereof of congressional leaders to the, quote, immigration is pro-business, unquote, message? Where is the resistance coming from, is the person's question.
I think with like a lot of other issues that there's a lot of sub-issues within the immigration debate. So I think there's a lot of people out there who want to do something, but in terms of what that something is where it always gets kind of bogged down. I think everyone, as I said before, that everyone understands it's broken. You have some people who say we're not going to do anything until we figure out, until we secure the borders, right? Well, what does that mean, right? Is it ever possible to say, is it really a threshold that you could never ever really meet, right? Can you build a wall high enough, long enough? And then what about people who come in through the coast? I mean, so it's like, the question is, when people say we have to secure the borders first, you have to define what that threshold actually means, because it's really it's to me it's something that I don't think that there's some people that you can never get far enough, right? So so for that group, I'm not sure where you go, but I think it's to pin down to say, what does border security actually mean? And then when you look at the issue of a pathway to citizenship, there are some people out there who would say that, you know, a 200-year waiting period and $10 zillion fine is still amnesty, right? So anything that, and so there's that threshold too with no matter what you do that they're going to call it amnesty. So there has to be some sort of way to handle, you know, whatever that number is now, 10 million to 13 million, whatever that number is, no one really knows for sure, right? So how do you get through that? And then there's some who say, well, we're only going to do comprehensive or nothing at all. And if that's the case, then there's some folks who say, well, then the answer is nothing. So there's all kinds of issues in terms of why that's held up. And I mean, I'm not telling you guys something you don't already know, because you guys are living this issue like we are and trying to get something to happen. I do think that being able to deal with the issue, and I mentioned this before, is future flow. And a lot of times people just don't talk about that issue on any side, to be honest with you. And I think that you know, when people look at, you know, the immigration bill from the 80s, when they look back and say, boy, we tried to do this once and it was a failure. Well, the problem was with that bill, they never addressed future flow there either. It's still the same 1960s system. So we're kind of back to where we were. And so we have to be able to figure out how to fix that and to make sure that that system is better reflective of what's driving the immigration to start with. And so I think once we get that fixed, however that's happened, eventually that helps with, in my opinion, helps with both border security and the undocumented issue, because you have legal pathways for people to actually come and work who want to come and work. I mean, that's why people are coming here, right? In many, many instances. It's not always the case. So how do we break that logjam? I think that we try to come up with as much compromise as we can, get as much done as we can, figure out how to fix future flow, and try to build that coalition where you can get the 50+1 majorities in both houses and a presidential signature.
So I think that leads nicely actually into another question, which was, other than just saying immigration reform, what specific messages should we send to our members of Congress and presidential candidates? And I think as people increasingly throughout the day have talked about and referenced this idea of compromise, what are some of the key messages that in which you think there should not be compromise? What are the priorities for those of you here on this panel?
Where do you want to start?
Do you want to start?
Okay. I have two messages that I wasn't able to do in my presentation, but one of the messages that I would send to any presidential candidates, and not only presidential, but any political candidates, is what I said before. We need to smartly manage the human resources that immigrants and refugees in this country represent and bring to this country. But in terms of the political environment currently, what we are foreseeing is that the Republican Party candidates have shown to be strongly influenced by the most conservative and extremist among the ranks. That has to change. They have to own their own leadership, and they have to lead by their own values, but honoring those values versus party interests, okay? Democrats have lost a significant amount of Latino voters due to the fact that they didn't pass immigration reform during the first 2 years of the Obama administration, as it was promised. And recently, a Democrat governor also joined the lawsuit against the implementation of the executive action relief programs that would have helped around 5 million people. So immigrants, not just Latinos, but immigrants in general, are very disenchanted with that as well. And then we have another issue. The large majority of the electorate is composed of poorly informed and easily swayed voters due to the impact of TV and radio political ads. Why? Because we have become a society of which our attention span doesn't go beyond 30 seconds, okay? Others are apathetic for the lack of a candidate that could win their vote. So the number of independents is rising and rising and rising. But we don't have a choice. So I would suggest that some of us need to start running for those positions.
And so others, to be clear, if you could hone in on, one particular important priority in immigration reform. We know the comprehensive reform bill was 800 pages. Right? What's one priority your organization would really want to emphasize to folks here who are interested in contacting elected officials about immigration reform?
Go for it.
Sure. Well, in this ongoing battle, as far as we see it with LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens, we need a pathway to citizenship. We've been compromising over and over again. We have 12 million immigrants who've been here for a long time, who've been working, contributing to their community. They are paying taxes. They're not benefiting from what they're paying in. There needs to be a way of doing it. We are a country of immigrants. This should not be a political discussion. This should be about our history as a country. So getting to that discussion, getting them to do that, it's going to take some political force. At the end of the day, this is a civil rights battle, as there was one in the 60s. We're just going to have to get out in the streets. We're going to have to apply the pressure. The logical arguments don't seem to be working anymore. It's about feet on the ground and doing the demonstrations. And in LULAC, we're discussing that. National Council La Raza is discussing that. Just some major events need to happen to get these elected leaders to make the right decision, because logic no longer works. Very good. You bet. We form in coalitions. We love that. It was interesting meeting with Joni Ernst too. in February, she stated to us, I'm all for helping the children. I just don't want to help the parents. That's basically what she said, but she's operating off a worksheet that's been provided to her. But it does take mobilization, working in coalitions. The Latino community has been doing that and is ready to do more of that.
And I don't recommend policy to anybody. That's not my role. I don't get involved with it. But I just would leave you with a food for thought, or two food for thoughts. The first one is, no matter what political perspective or orientation do you come from, the fact still remains that kids under 18 don't have the legal agency to dictate their own lives, right? They can't make legal decisions. And so I believe that without that power, no matter how the child got to the United States, they are, as a consequence of somebody else's decisions, not their own. So why are we punishing them? And the second one I wanted to leave you with is a story. There's an author called James Lowen who wrote a book, Lies My Teacher Told Me. And one of his premises is this of heroification. And this is not to legislators, but it's to you who are sitting in this room. And he talks about that we tend to put history in the context of big heroes who are going to come and save us. And the reality is, when it comes to civil rights in this country, it's been the small battles. It's been the one person, the two people that have stood up in friendship and partnership with different organizations like LULAC or National Council of Raza or ACLU or so many other out there from both sides of the spectrum that really made a difference. So let's not forget that part of being citizens is to give back, and citizens in that very broad land is to give back. And to when we see injustice anywhere, it is a threat to all of us.
We have one last question, and maybe the person who asked it can elaborate. Actually, it says, within the labor movement, does the anti-immigrant sentiments of some affect support for any candidates? The person who... Is that your question? So when I want to raise one, and I think in conjunction with that, since this is sort of our final discussion, I think that there is a tension we're not talking about today, which is that or we haven't spent much time on, is that the discussion has become so extreme about presence. Should people's presence even be lawful? That it obscures a question that's about people's rights. If we accept if people have presence, is that the same as having rights and justice? And it gets into that path to citizenship question. Is only presence the goal, or is this goal something broader about full rights and full workplace rights in terms of labor issues and full?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to? Jay? Okay. I love the question. I really love it. Okay. One of the things that we have been doing in AFSC for many, many years is trying to form precisely alliances with unions, okay? We have been very successful at the top level. The problem in most cases is that those top levels, the decisions, and it happens also with some churches. I have to mention, for instance, the Catholic Church. The bishops say one thing, such as the leadership in unions say one thing. We agree is on behalf of our own memberships. We need to grow our membership. They were losing members left and right. Some unions were more progressive than others, but they missed the boat on educating the ranks. When the people at the grassroots level is not on board, it doesn't matter what the leadership says, okay? That's one thing. The other thing is that in terms of us as members of the community. We also need to take our own responsibility and realize our personal power and use it collectively to make sure that we start that education at the grassroots level. It doesn't have to come from the top leader. Why are we always waiting for somebody to lead? And something very interesting that I have found during the major marches of 2005 and 2006, and that went on even to 2007, was that I was appalled to realize that American-born people didn't know that the right of peaceful assembly is a protected constitutional right. We, the organizers of those events, assumed that American-born citizens knew that. And it was a wrong assumption, much to my surprise, because they were saying, oh, you're an immigrant, you're here without documents, you have no rights. That's not true. Go look at the 14th article of the Constitution, and it says otherwise. That's why we are also treated, like any other person. If you commit a crime or a violation, you're sent to the judicial system, right? Well, in the same way, we are supposed to have at least those minimal protections that are covered by the Constitution.
So, and I would actually ask Mazahir to speak to this question, because I think that it's, there's this perception, often workers, U.S.-born workers are held up as the contrast, right? Like as if this is a battle of austerity. It's either, give your jobs to new people, right, or keep your jobs for yourselves. And in fact, organized labor has taken a strong position that every time a worker is denied their rights, all workers suffer. And Mazahir, if you could speak to the role that unions have played in establishing and supporting the Center for Worker Justice, I think that this is something that people don't know about and see. So could you speak to that?
I don't get your question.
I'm sorry. The role that like the Teamsters Union and the Iowa City Federation of Labor and other local labor unions have played in the Worker Center.
Yeah, really without allies like the labor unions and like guest community alliance, nothing we can be done. Because, they really support us in like many ways. Since, as I told you earlier, like as immigrant by ourselves, maybe, like I am by ourselves, maybe I can do something little, but if we join with other people, we can like do a lot of things. That's why now in the Center for Worker Justice, like when the Federation of Labor and, some Kyrgyz and all this, together we always start like everything, and they help us organize, and we will start doing any idea with the help of them. And yes, from there we can, achieve whatever we want. And this will put us back if we just become really together. We can do a lot of, good things, and we can achieve.
Yeah. We in LULAC have always had a relationship with the union movement. As a matter of fact, many of our founding members came out of the UAW and helped form some of the original councils here in Iowa. But presently now we're working with the Iowa Federation of Labor, Central Labor Bodies. UAW is part of that, ASME. The issue now that we look at our coalition is kind of a united front effort to fight for good paying jobs, to raise the minimum wage. Outsourcing is the key issue now, fighting trade agreements like the recent one right now. I remember back when I was in my 30s fighting NAFTA. I had worked for the president of the Teamsters Union in Washington, D.C. I think everything has changed over the last 20 to 30 years. It's no longer whether or not a worker is an immigrant or not. It's how do we preserve our jobs? How do we keep our jobs in our country? How do we stop the outsourcing? And I think we all get that, minority community, labor movement. We're all working hand in hand on that.
I just add to the conversation a little bit different analysis, and I think that, you know, in the state of Iowa right now we have 4% unemployment. There's huge demand for high-skilled, medium, mid-skilled, and low-skilled workers all across the state. So, in terms of, you know, our immigrants taking jobs from other people, we just need a lot more workers. Period. Right? I think also. You know, we're sitting here in a big university town. There's evidence that shows that, let's see if I can find this here. For every foreign student who graduates from a U.S. university with an advanced degree and stays and works in a STEM-related field, creates an additional 2.62 American jobs. They're not taking jobs, they're creating jobs, right? They're job creators. I think also in terms of some of my comments on entrepreneurship, as I'd mentioned before, immigrants are more than twice as likely as native-born citizens to start new businesses. 28% of all U.S. companies recently started had immigrant founders, despite the fact that immigrants comprised only 13% of the population. More than 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children. And businesses owned by immigrants employ 1 in 10 Americans and generated in 2011 $775 billion in revenue. So again, I think we need to think not only in terms of just the workers, but in terms of as job creators, and immigrants are doing that in numbers that exceed the native-born population. That's a big part of this equation that we need to continue to think about as well.
And they are consumers too. One of the things that people haven't realized is that if we were to deport 11 million people, not only how costly it would be, but what an impact at the economic level it would have. Why? Because you would have people that would not be buying cars, that would not be buying services, that would not be creating jobs, because as the population grows, they create jobs as well. They need services, they are paying taxes. I don't know how many of you know about this very little spoken of fund. What is the name, Erica? Earnings suspended fund or something like that from the Social Security Administration. There are more than 860 billion with B dollars in that program that cannot be attached to any particular worker. Those are taxes that have been paid by undocumented workers. So right there, we have a huge contribution to this country. So immigrants are not just employees. They are not just providing labor. They are not just creating jobs just by the fact of being entrepreneurial. They are consumers. Hello, let's use the market here. Why are they growing as small and medium-sized businesses? Because other businesses are not responding to our needs. And I am not necessarily advocating for assimilation. I think that we need to start thinking more of integration. Integration means that we are going to take the best of these talents, and at the same time, we are going to share the best of the talents that this country has to offer to these people. Thank you.
And on that note, I think that's a perfect note to conclude this fantastic day.